months, or just do them, okay.
I would do, yeah, however you wanna do it, together, separate. This is finance. I don't know if you have notes with all that.
I do not.
These folks up here on the screen are finance.
All right.
Or on the top of the agenda.
So, committee member David Weiss.
Here.
Committee woman Patty McCowan, I think all the.
McEwen, here.
McEwen, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay.
Committee member Kyle Williams.
Here.
And committee member Lauren Toman.
Here.
And,
Capital improvements.
okay.
Do you want me to list them all?
Sure.
So Michael Rushing, is not here. Danita Williams.
Here.
Here.
And Annie Dethridge, here.
So you've got two members for
Right,
capital.
so we don't
improvement.
have a quorum for capital improvement, but we do finance. We'll go ahead and walk through all of the information, because I feel like it's beneficial for finance committee to the capital improvement pieces, so.
All right, so
We ready?
we're ready.
Okay. Okay. So, the capital improvement program. So I do have the text kind of introducing. Thank you, Devin. Please make sure your mics are on. That means the button should be pushed forward. And when you are speaking or have a question, make sure you're speaking directly into a mic. So you may have to adjust it down towards you when that happens, okay? And this is, you won't hear it through the mics here in the room, but that way anyone watching live stream or the recorded version will be able to hear, okay? All right. So, this text, introduction to the CIP was not in the previous draft version of the capital improvement plan. It's just kind of an overview or introduction to the capital improvement plan. So it just kind of explains this is the city's strategic plan for investing in infrastructure and capital assets. It's for the next 5 years. We do use it as a planning tool for budgeting. We do update it annually, as those of you know. Yeah, so, okay, so my apologies. Finance committee members, let me back up, don't have this in their packet, okay? My apologies. So only.
Watch the cords.
So, yeah, so in, each packet is a little different. It's based on which committee you're on. So my apologies, okay, if you're hunting for this, so. So again, this kind of brief introduction here. So we do update the capital improvement plan every year. We, you know, as the 5 years, as each year rolls closer to that budget year, we update numbers. It's more solidified. The further out in the 5 years it is, truly more it's just planning and best guess on numbers, okay? So why it matters. So it's designed around 2 key objectives: to maintain our existing infrastructure and to plan for future growth and needs. Okay, that's why we're plotting these out. And yeah, like a household plans for replacing things like your roof or purchasing a new vehicle, the city uses the CIP to forecast major expenses, evaluate funding options, and ensure responsible long-term budgeting. Okay. What qualifies as a capital project? Useful life of 5 years or more, and a cost of $10,000 or more. Okay. These are the types of projects or purchases that generally fall into the capital improvement plan. It's going to be land and building acquisitions, new construction, major rehab or repairs, annual street maintenance program, and then vehicles, equipment, furniture, and fixtures. Okay, that meet one of those other criteria: 5 years or more, or 10,000 or more. So again, a kind of a little note. Yeah, if the city's general operating budget is its checking account for day-to-day expenses, the CIP is the savings plan for long-term high-cost items. Okay. And then how they're funded, the funds you'll see to pay for these projects generally will come from one of these. Occasionally there will be a different fund it comes out of, but Special Streets Tax Fund, Capital Improvement Sales Tax Fund, Park Improvement Sales Tax Fund, and then electric, water, and wastewater depreciation and replacement funds, and then the airport fund. Okay. Current highlights, just some differences on this year's CIP compared to last year. Total planned capital investments over the whole 5-year period, total $29,650,000. That's an increase from last year's $25,459,000. The capital budget for the current year that we're planning, so fiscal year 26, that's $15,972,000. And that's compared to last year's, which was $8,562,000. Okay, so quite an increase. And the major increases in both the capital improvement plan and the budget that you'll hear once we're done with the capital improvement plan are vast majority due to grant funds that have been rolling forward each year, because as these projects in the last few years, they've not moved as far forward as we were expecting them. But we're getting to the point, I think I'd stated this in one of the last meetings, they're gonna have to start being completed in this budget year and about half of the next budget year, because we've got deadlines, especially for the ARPA grant funds. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so in some instances, you're gonna see needed improvements that are currently unfunded in the capital improvement plan. That means they're recognized as priorities, but as of now, they lack identified revenue streams. Now, those things are all gonna be in farther years out into the future, okay?
Right.
As we move closer, we'll have identified those revenue streams, but it might be grant funding, it might be something else. We know it's a need, we just haven't identified how we're gonna accomplish it yet. So you will see some of those in there. Each project is reflected in the detailed budget for that year for the corresponding department. So we'll go through the capital improvement plan, and when we're going through the budget itself that Stacy will walk us through, you'll see, she'll have slides and we'll talk about, okay, these are the capital improvement items for that budget, for just the water or just the police or just whichever department, okay? Okay, so as we jump in, so you all have seen this before. This is just the summary. This is capital improvement revenues, what fund they're coming from, and the totals for each of the years. This is the expenditure summary. So again, totals for this budget we're planning now and for each of the years upcoming. Okay. If you have questions at any point, let me know. We're not gonna go through page by page like we did last time. Okay. So this is what I call the main CIP sheet. Increase that a little bit, forgive me. The changes that have happened since our last time, there have been very few. And the ones that have changed, I'm gonna scroll down, let me see here. The document scanning, right here, we had a number in there for the current year last time. That was based on grant funding. So this number would have been the city match, down below in grants would have been the grant funding. We were not approved for a grant this year. We were informed this was for scanning our old minutes, ordinances, all of, city records. That funding at the state level has been cut entirely, and so much so that they even laid off staff. So for this year, like I said, no one got awarded funding. We've left it in future years, hoping that that might come back. We don't know exactly what's gonna happen with that. So, okay, so that's that change. And we had 5,000 plugged in, I think, for this coming year. The other one, let me get down here to electric department, and this was based on conversations we had last time. The bucket truck replacement. Last time we had it plugged out for a lease for 5 years, and based on conversations, we changed that to a flat-out purchase, which was staff's recommendation.
Right.
So that's a change to the CIP. Believe those, and then the corresponding document scanning, where are we? Down here, document scanning services. This is the one I talked about, that the funding was cut for that department at the state level. Those are the only changes to the CIP. Okay. So I'd be open for any questions. I didn't include all of the detail sheets in anyone's packet this time because nothing has changed in any of those except those 2 changes that I mentioned. So I stand for any questions, either from CIP committee members or finance committee members. Okay. Danita, do you have any? Annie?
No, everything looks good.
Okay. Anybody else? Questions about CIP? Do you have a question, Kyle? Okay. You start smiling at me. I'm like, uh-oh, here he comes.
Here comes Kyle.
Huh?
No.
Okay. And so that's all I have. I have all of those sheets in the online packet, the detailed descriptions and sheets. For those who maybe haven't seen it, for every item in this spreadsheet, we have a project sheet for it that explains what it is, what its costs are for the 5 years, all of the details for that individual item. So like I said, any questions, I'm happy to go over it. But otherwise, that's what I have for changes, and we can move on if you all are ready.
We're ready.
We're ready? Okay, all right. Okay, hang on, Stacy, let me find. Do what? Oh, good luck. That's in a negative number? Hang on. Take me just a minute to get to the end of the CIP year. There we go. Let me reduce this. Okay. All right. So this is the intro to the actual budget portion. Okay, should be a green sheet. Yeah, you're looking for the first green one. All right, so I'll walk us through the intro, and then after that, Stacy will walk us through details. Okay. All right, so presented is a balanced fiscal year 26 budget. It's a $29 million budget for this year. As I mentioned, a lot of that growth is due to grants rolling forward. It's a 17% increase from the 25 budget. Yeah, and just like I explained, it's mainly grant-funded projects that account for the majority of that increase. Total expenditures on grant-funded projects is roughly $10.4 million in this budget. Okay, so just to give you an idea how much of that is grant-funded. On the revenue side, increases in revenues, again, largely accounted for by the increase in grant revenues, which have rolled forward. So the 2026 reserve funds and transfers. So reserve funds, a lot of you have heard me say those are our OCRAP funds. You know, emergency happens, and transfers between funds. So there's 4 types of transfers. This is general information. You'll see in every budget. First one is transfers from operating funds to reserve funds. So there's no other way for us to get money into the reserve funds. We have to transfer it from operating into reserves. So you'll see that every year. Transfers from the operating funds to the depreciation and replacement. That's our repair and replacement funds for equipment and facilities. That happens every year. General fund transfers to funds without independent or sufficient revenue stream. So I have some examples. Cemetery doesn't have an independent revenue stream sufficient to cover it. Building permits, economic development, none of those have their own independent revenue streams. So we have to transfer from general fund to those to cover their expenses. So again, that happens every year. And the last one that you'll see every year is the 5% royalty fee that's transferred from the electric fund to the general fund. Now, the reason we do that, if an independent utility were operating inside the city limits of Salem, they would be paying the city a royalty fee for operating in our city boundaries. And so since our utilities operate as independent business funds, we do this is to make sure that it's paying its fair share. The other reason and argument for doing something like this, if it was an independent utility, say even intercounty, they have a CEO, they have their own finance staff. We don't have separate staff for that in our utility, so it's my time and it's Stacy's time, it's Steve's time, it's all of admin's time that we spend on utilities.
Okay.
Okay, it helps to cover that. Okay. All right, so our reserve fund policy. So this is the policy as it exists right now. This is something I hope that Finance Committee, you guys might be willing to, through the year, maybe have some other meetings, and we develop this a little more fully. But basically what it says is that for our utilities, that our reserve fund should be 25% of the previous year's operating expenditures. Okay, so we try to do that. Yeah, we try to do that. That's what I'll leave that there. So that's it in a gist, the gist of it. We apply that to our general fund. Even though policy doesn't say that, we try to apply that to general fund so that there's a reserve account there as well. Okay. All right, previous year's balances, because this is something you'll hear about as well in the budget. There are 5 instances in this budget that's before you where we are recommending that we use previous year's ending balances for specific purchases and improvements. Not generally for operations, but for capital improvements, okay? So the Parks Improvement Fund is planning for repaving the T-ball fields parking lot. The park board has reviewed this and has made a recommendation to approve their budget with a almost $27,000 transfer from previous year funds to help cover some of that. Okay. The airport fund is presented and recommended from the airport board to use almost $47,000 from previous year's funds also for improvements at the airport. Okay. So those two funds, there's a difference here. These two do not have separate reserve funds. Okay. Then the electric utility is budgeted to purchase that new bucket truck, so there's that extra, okay, from previous year's funds. Utility committee also voted to recommend use of a portion of the water prior year funds in addition to raising rates to cover the rehab of the industrial park water tower. So there's that total, $183,000 roughly. And then the sewer fund. So this has to do with our bonding. We had to take out a preliminary bond to cover necessary expenses prior to the full bond closing. So the full bond has not closed yet, okay? But we were incurring costs. So we had to do a preliminary bond. With the closing of the current budget year, those funds from that preliminary bond will be categorized as prior year funds. But they were received with the intent of paying off specific costs and will roll over to the larger permanent bond when it closes. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Any questions on that? Okay. Okay. All right, so increases budget-wide. So we are recommending a 2% cost of living increase for all city employees and up to 1% merit raise for those whose merit evaluations warrant it. Now, we're also looking at pay scale true-ups, and we'll talk about those in a future slide. And so basically what we're saying is employees who get a pay scale true-up won't receive this also because their pay scale true-up will be more than this amount. Okay, so they get at least that amount plus. Okay. All right. So in order to put the budget together, it was necessary for us to make a series of assumptions. The first four relate to employee retention and recruitment. The first one's approval of new employee health insurance proposal, and I'll share the details of that with you in a moment. The pay scale adjustments. Now, we did adjust 2 positions last year. This year, I think we're adjusting all but about 4 or 5 positions. And again, I'll explain more details on that here in a moment. Cost of living adjustment. We had to assume that would be approved. We had to assume merit raises would be approved. And then also a proposed change of the animal care coordinator from a part-time to a full-time position. Okay? So that's the assumptions we made to put the numbers together. All right, so the new employee health insurance proposal. So with board consent and approval, the city has in recent years covered $550 per employee per month for employees' health insurance. So any premium or costs not covered in that amount are at the employee's expense. Okay, so that's the city's obligation, what they've committed to. The health insurance proposal for the upcoming year is the same as last year for costs to the city, so that same $550 per employee per month, with an added employee cost of, and these are the amounts, $85.36 per month or $16.40 per month, depending on which plan they chose. Okay, so that's the cost to the employee. And those are slight increases. They're not hugely significant. So they weren't even $20. They were small increases. Also, that the city would continue to cover the cost of employee short-term disability for all eligible employees, and that's roughly $12,000 a year to cover that cost. So those were the assumptions that we made on that. Pay schedule adjustments. So there were 2 positions. So with the state increasing the minimum wage for the state of Missouri, okay, we have 2 positions that kind of get caught up in that. And so that's assuming that we'll adjust those 2 onto a new pay scale with $15 as that minimum starting for that position, okay? So again, that will go into effect January 1st. And I think it's noted later on, but we have discussed among staff and we're proposing that we flip the time of year that we do COLA increases and merit increases. So in the past, we've done COLA July 1, as soon as the budget's approved, and we've done the merit increases January 1. because moving forward, the state's going to adjust that minimum by the Consumer Product Index, the CPI, which is the same indicator I use to recommend COLA. We're recommending we flip and we do COLA increases January 1, same time the state's going to increase those minimum wages. That way everyone's on the same schedule. Because yeah, it'll go up to 15 this January 1. Thereafter, it's supposed to adjust by that CPI each year. Okay. And of note, and I will just say this, being a local government, we do not have to follow the state's minimum
That's
wage.
what I was going to ask you.
Right. We
I was
don't
gonna
have
ask if you had
to,
to follow
but we
that.
feel like to remain competitive, we need to.
So the schools don't have to either, right? Schools, hospital, and you guys.
I think so, yeah. Yeah. So like I said, we don't have to, but we feel like in order to remain competitive and get quality people, we should follow it. And then also, we did create one of the changes in the positions for animal control and code enforcement. In the past, our animal control person has been on strictly an animal control pay scale. And I'll explain in a minute how we come up with the pay scale numbers. For this year, we're proposing that that be blended because a code enforcement officer has a much higher pay scale than animal control. And we're proposing that this person move into a 50-50 split of that position. And so I blended the two to come up with a pay scale. Okay. And we'll, yeah. In addition, we'll move that animal control person. They're already full-time, but they've been doing more animal control, and we hope to shift them to more code enforcement to help support that. The animal care coordinator, which is one of those that have impacted by the minimum wage, will go to full-time, from part-time to full-time, to help support and take up slack with the animal control piece. Okay. Okay. Okay, more on the pay scale adjustments. This is an explanation of how I do this. I know I went through explaining it last time. Do you all want me to walk through it again? I know some of you maybe didn't hear it.
Probably oughta.
Probably oughta?
Probably
Okay.
oughta.
Okay, I'm gonna move forward in the slide and I'll walk you guys through the actual pay scale as I explain it, okay? So these are really small. Let me see if I can increase enough that you can see numbers. Okay, is that, go off the screen here. Okay, so this is the beginning of the pay scale. So these two in green, these are the ones I mentioned are impacted by the minimum wage increases.
Right.
Okay? So what you'll see is the first line in white is our current pay scale plus the 2% COLA. Okay? If that position, we're recommending an increase in the pay scale, it's below it in another color. So the two green are the minimum wage impacted positions. So this is what we're proposing. So current pay scale with the 2% COLA starts at $13.14 and maxes out at $15.70. So you'll see this is just barely above what the new minimum will be. The proposed pay scale would start at the 15, which is the state minimum, and max out at $17.93. So this is what we're proposing for that position. Same thing for the general labor position. Okay. Then we have, like, if there's no colored band below it, that means we're not recommending a change in that pay scale. Okay, and I'll explain why in a moment here. So looking at this next one, heavy equipment operator. So right here, you'll see this MML average wage. So the Missouri Municipal League does a salary and wage survey every year. So they send out the survey to all the cities that are members and ask them, what is your pay for this position? And they go through just about every position in the city. We've got a couple that they don't have comps for, but pretty much every position in the city, those who respond, they compile all that data and they send it back out to those who request it. I request it every year. I then take and I sort them for every position. You have to do a different sort because some cities may have that position, some may not. So every position, I sort them by population and I pull out the ones between 4,000 and 5,000 population.
Okay.
I average the wage. Now, before I average it, I pull out the highest wage, the lowest wage, and any union wages, okay, to try to get a good comp. So this is that averaged wage per the Municipal League data, 1992. Then I take into consideration that Dent County is not exactly the economic hub of the state of Missouri, okay? So I look at the counties that all of these cities are in, because I can get an average wage countywide for all the counties. And then I compare Dent County to those. So this one, we're at 91% of what the other counties are paying for that position. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So I take this average, I multiply it by this Dent County factor, and that's how I come up with the mid-range number right here. Okay, so adjusted for Dent County. Okay. So that's what you're gonna see on all of these orange or tan bands here. You're gonna see the average wage for cities our population size, what the Dent County factor is, and then that's what comes up with this kind of mid-range step 5 number.
Okay.
Okay, they are 3% between each step. That's what's on this pay scale. So everyone in the tan or the orange are ones that we are proposing a pay scale adjustment. Now, a pay scale adjustment doesn't mean that employee gets a raise. It might if what that employee is making is, say, this one, heavy equipment operator, if they're making $15.66 right now, and the pay scale adjustment is improved, well, all of a sudden, they're not even on the pay scale. So that employee would get an increase in pay to get them to here. Okay? If they're up here at $17.63, well, they're still on the pay scale. They wouldn't get a pay raise based on that. That employee would be eligible for the COLA and the merit. Okay? And so that follows through the entire. Here's the animal control code enforcement that I mentioned. This is a 50-50 split. That combined pay scale, mid-range, the averages from the other cities is here. There's the Dent County factor. That gets us here. Okay. And so, like I said, there's only, I want to say 4 or 5 positions that don't have a pay scale increase. Any questions on the pay scale increases? Okay. All right. That was a lot, so we'll move on. I promise I'll let Stacy talk in a minute. All right, so the cost of living adjustment, that 2% COLA. So this is just some additional kind of background information. Here's where I pull it from, the Consumer Price Index for the St. Louis area. This is as of April 2025. It's 2%, 2.2, so 2% over the previous 12 months. Okay, so this is where I pull that from. And then we also look at just some things. I'm going to drop some of this extra stuff off next year, but it's stuff I've been tracking in the past. Average City of Salem employee wage. Oh, that should say 25, my apologies, is $36,851. The median wage, $37,103. So you see it was a 3% change in the average City of Salem employee wage from last year to now, or to what's proposed. 5% in the median wage. And then we have the average Dent County wages through June 30th. That's when they then issue July 1, the new average wages, $38,844. And then here's where I got that. It's a 7% increase. So anyway, average household income, this is a number that gets batted around a lot over the course of the year. Average household income in Salem is $53,198. And that comes from the Census Bureau. So anyway, and just then some more details for anyone who's interested. Okay. All right, merit raises, again, 1%. Those are performed annually based on employees' performance. The individual scoring determines what level of merit raise the employee has earned. We split that, so 1% is what's proposed this year. We split that into 0.5%. And if they score an average or better, average, I split it in half. So that average score up to the top excellent score gets split in half, and if they get a 0.5% for the first step, and then they get the other 0.5% if they score up in the excellent range. So whatever that merit proposed rate is, if it's 2%, if it's whatever, it's split in half in that way. Okay. Yeah, and then we talk about the flip in the timing of that, January 1st versus July 1st. Okay, We've already talked about the proposed changing the animal shelter technician, animal care person from part-time to full-time. Okay, and then points to consider for tonight as we walk through the budget itself. So again, it's a balanced budget for fiscal year '26 with the exceptions and assumptions previously noted. This is the second year of reducing dependency on transfers from the electric utility. So this is the second year where that's been down to 5%. Okay. And that was something that we said we were going to do when the voters approved the sales tax increase. The second year of setting funds aside in those depreciation and repair funds for future vehicle and equipment repairs and replacement. And it is a struggle to fully fund those, okay? And I'm gonna be honest, we don't fully fund them this year, okay? So that's just something to keep in mind. The sewer bond approved by voters in April of '23 should close before September, at least we're hoping. We've heard it may not. So we had been told that it was required by the state revolving fund that we have it closed by then. They're now telling us we won't lose funding if it doesn't. So fingers crossed that that's actually the case. It is required by the state revolving fund that we review and adjust rates each year as necessary. So we do that already, but we will continue, especially for the sewer fund. We do it with all our utilities. We do anticipate additional operational costs once the upgrades to the sewer treatment plant are completed. We know there will be additional chemical costs that we don't have now. We don't know exactly what those will be yet. So, okay. And then if there are other thoughts, considerations, or questions from any of you before we dive into the details of the budget. Like I said, this was the broad overview and introduction, so. No? Okay. All right. And we will dive right in. Start at page 1, Stephanie? Okay. I can increase this if you guys want. You tell me. This is our fund balance.
Okay, we'll start with that sheet I gave you all. My apologies, I did not get it
Oh, yeah,
on
I
the
don't have it to put
presentation.
up here, the sheet she handed out.
Yes.
Yeah.
So with the significant changes from our previous meeting, because I know we went detailed slide by slide in the previous meeting. So I will point out the significant changes that we've made so far. I do want to note on the changes in staffing. It's not changing the number, but we are changing full-time cemetery position to be moved to also part-time. So he'll be part-time cemetery and part-time streets. So on his downtime, mostly during the winter, we can utilize that staff person to help with the streets department. So I don't know if you want to update that or not.
Gotcha.
So this pay scale true-up, firmed up numbers. I know we did talk about this, and I had numbers plugged in our last meeting, but we've trued up some numbers. So this will go into effect January 1st. So the fiscal '26 budget impact is for a half a year, and it will be $118,000, with the full impact being fiscal year '27 at $270,000. Pay increases, that's the merits, and the 2% COLA is a budget impact of around $106,000. And then Sally, I'd already touched on this. The park board has approved to use prior year fund balance for their deficit of $27,000. The utility board, we didn't have a quorum, but those who were there recommend pulling from prior year funds to balance their budget of $302,000 deficit to purchase a new bucket truck. And then general fund, non-departmental, I did increase that budget line significantly. The special services line, it increased $25,000 for IT management and security. We have a third party that we are going to be kind of handling all of our IT management. Airport board approved using prior year fund balance for their deficit of $46,000, almost $47,000. It was in the previous meeting, but I went ahead and put it in here that the water fund rate increase, additional revenue is $343,000. And then the sewer fund rates increase, additional revenues of $182,000. So,
And those are the basic changes.
yes, that's the basic changes. So I don't know if you all want to go slide by slide like we did last meeting, or if there's specific questions about the budget you want to look at. If we just look at this slide, this does show all of the funds. and where that very last column shows where their fund balance at the end of the fiscal year. So pretty much, they're all pretty well healthy.
So this column is what the beginning balance would be,
That will change. That's the projected amount. It will change to the actuals.
and what we're proposing next budget year's ending balance.
Correct.
So you can see the difference.
Some of these funds we don't really use much, like those with very low balances. Yeah, we don't really use those funds, but they're there and they have a balance. Yeah, they're all pretty, pretty good. So if we start the budget year at around 13 million, and if you look at the very far right, we're actually increasing the budget line by couple, 300,000, so that's always good to see an increase. And then that 780,000, that's the use of prior year funds that we're pulling from that first column. Basically, it's pulling from that to balance their budgets. So any questions so far? Is there any specific that you want to look at? We can go slide by slide if you want to.
This time I do have a question.
Yes.
So in the general fund DNR, I understand that's replacement stuff of depreciation. I guess my question, I know the general fund takes care of a lot of different things, including police vehicles. I was looking at the general fund and emergency funds, or the general fund DNR expenditures. The details. It seems like it's mostly for the police vehicles and maybe for some equipment for special street. I'm trying to get an idea of like how much is necessary for each DNR to try to kind of put in for these.
If you want to kind of explain your worksheet.
About it, like I guess like how much capital and like how much capital do we have in the general fund? Because in the electric, it makes sense with poles, lines.
Capital improvements, from the capital improvement plan, for
Mhm.
general fund, we have 2 items.
Yeah.
Okay, that's it, 2 items. Police vehicles and replacement of our financial and billing software for the city.
Okay.
So that's in-code replacement citywide.
Yeah.
And so one is 100,000, the other is just over 100,000.
Yeah, it's just I was looking at
And that's
some
what
of
we
that.
have for capital expenditures in this budget year.
Yeah, and we are transferring into the general DNR like
We can go down.
Well, right here, 392.
Yeah, 392.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is general fund, this top one in gray.
So the 392, so last year, we got a list of all of our vehicles.
Yeah.
And kind of figured out the useful life still left on them and kind of planned out what it would cost, what we need to be putting back every year to
Right.
purchase those future. So we're nowhere close to what it needs to be, but 392 is what.
We're in year 2 of even doing
Yeah.
this.
No, I understand. Like we need to build up because
But
we
it's
have a certain amount of capital or a certain amount, and you would assume like you would be replacing that every.
Right.
You put money in
Right.
supposedly equal to
Right, so in
what
the,
you
in the
need to
perfect
take out.
world,
Yeah.
okay, what we do, that spreadsheet, that like Stacy was talking, so last year we did this inventory of all of our equipment and vehicles.
Yeah.
And then we put them, what's the remaining years of life left? And then we took the cost to replace that,
Yeah.
and we divided it between those remaining years of life. Then, column 1, well, this is what we need this budget year for replacement,
Right.
for general fund, for electric fund, for whatever fund it is. That's how we're determining how much should be transferred into that reserve replacement fund.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I understand. I understand that. I was just wondering if that was over or under what that would typically be, or if we're trying to build up a slight, like
I
if
see
the
what-
$300,000 is.
So,
Trying to
I see what you're
build
saying.
up.
You're saying capital for right now, and then what's added to that to continue to grow that fund
Yeah.
through the years.
Exactly.
Like, are we gonna keep putting in like $400,000
Yes.
every year
That's
on
the
this?
Probably.
goal,
Probably.
hopefully more, but
Okay.
just
Because
depends.
when you schedule it out, so in that spreadsheet, okay, and.
Yeah, I just wasn't
Yeah,
sure.
I'm a
Must be
nerd when it
figured
comes to Excel
400,000
spreadsheets.
Same.
But when you schedule that out, so I've got it out like 15, 20 years at this point. So say this year we need to replace 3 pickups citywide, okay?
Mhm.
The next year we've got 2 pickups and a bucket truck, well, we know we've got a bucket truck this year, but as an example. Then we've got a dump truck and something on year 3, and so like every year you're replacing something, but at the same time, as soon as you replace that, Then that new vehicle, you know it costs 70,000, so you divide that by your next 10 to 15 years and plug that in your schedule. So yes.
Along
that
with
kinda
inflation.
stays fairly level. I mean,
Yeah.
not perfectly. If anything, it will increase over time.
And you factor in inflation and,
Inflation.
Some.
Yeah.
The
I get-
intent is that if it's, and I think I explained this the other night.
You did.
Yeah, if it's a 15-year lifespan, we divide the cost for replacement by 14 years, knowing we're going to have to put more into it, but we don't know what that amount is in year 15. Is that-
no, yeah.
Yeah, I guess like my curiosity here, and this is not for this meeting here, could we get like at some point in the future, could we get for any of these DNRs, like what the goal should be
Yeah.
of what we should have in those, so we can see like how we're faring? Because I know we're really, really
Yep.
low in terms of
And
some
there
of
are
these.
some- I mean, sewer plant, I mean, I stated this the other night, sewer plant, we've never,
Yeah, I
Nowhere
understand, like,
near.
we're gonna be already
Yeah.
really low
Right.
on those funds.
Water,
But how
right.
much would that recurring cost typically be for input and output?
Okay.
And just see like where we're at on that kind of
Gotcha.
thing.
And,
It-
and so we can get that for you. I'm gonna make a disclaimer
it's-
right now, though. This is year 2 of even doing this.
Got it.
So
Right.
we're
No.
perfecting and still adding to, and then realizing, oh crap, we
That-
should put this in there also.
Yeah, this is just something,
Yeah.
I hate adding work, but like, I understand it, but like, seeing where we're at, so we're putting in 392,
Right.
how much are we supposed to be putting in and how much do we have?
Right.
That- You know,
Right.
what's the goal of that?
Right.
You know, another piece to this is buildings.
Right.
Really,
We don't have those in there at all
technically,
right
that
now.
should be in there
No,
too,
I
but we can't
understand, yeah, and
even
But
like-
if we can't
touch
fund
that.
equipment and vehicles, we're,
Yeah.
do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's
So-
the same thing with like, we should be taking how much,
Yeah.
water line we have, dividing the amount by
Absolutely, yeah.
whatever the
Right.
replacement time is. I just don't know what that amount would cost per year on that kind of a schedule.
Right.
So-
Just an estimate would be nice.
Yeah.
So every year you're like archiving and figuring out like what needs to, yeah.
Yeah, every year we're adding something
Learning.
new to it. And you gotta figure, I mean, for me in this role, this is just the 3rd budget I've helped put together. So
I
we're-
understand, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? We're
No,
building
yeah.
and adding layers each year. I'm sure staff is like, oh, what are we doing
Yeah, first
now?"
year, I think it was like 50 pages for a budget or something. And then the next year it was like 120, and now this one's 244. It's just,
And I think I brought this up at the last meeting. And I hope, I don't mean to, but it looks like you're attempting to fix in the past what has not been.
Exactly.
Right, we've got a lot of, sorry, I keep forgetting to
I'm
speak
not
to
trying
the
to
mic.
throw people under the bus, but
No, but we do. We have a lot of kind of deferred maintenance
Yeah.
that we're trying to catch up on. And how do we get a handle on that?
Right.
You know, a perfect example, a letter that we wrote, the Board of Aldermen approved, and we sent to our legislators this year, just a couple months ago, you know, outlined, we have $50 million in utility infrastructure upgrades that we need to be doing. And I don't have a clue how we'd pay for that.
yeah,
So,
definitely.
so it's that kind of mountain that we're trying to climb and figure out how do we
Right.
tackle this. So yeah, putting all of these things in place is an effort to get us to a point where we can start addressing those things, and that in the future, we don't have the same kind of issue. So,
And there is a dual purpose for this as well, that it helps make it easier for the public to understand what's going on in these different categories. They're not lumped together now, they're divided out, so the public can actually get a grasp on what, why, and when.
yes.
Yeah.
Transparency is important.
I'm sure they'll love to hear that we're really low on this.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the
Anyways.
tough part. I mean, it is, because we do still have to balance what are utility rates and where are they, but at the same time, if we can't pay for maintaining and upgrading our infrastructure in different pieces, then we're not gonna be a whole lot better off. So it is a tough thing to balance. But that's why we have these conversations.
Yeah,
So,
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
thank you.
I do want to add onto our funds, we will be adding 2 more additional funds. I don't have them on here yet. With the SRF guidelines, the state revolving fund, that's where we're doing our bond financing from. They require the sewer to have a separate revenue fund and then also a debt service fund. So I will be adding those 2 funds here. It won't change any numbers, but you'll see some numbers moving from one fund to a different fund.
Okay.
And those are all requirements of the bonding.
Do you want to look at anything else? We can look at the grants, just to overall go down 2 pages, I think. So this is, can we make it smaller maybe? There you go. So this is just a look at all of the grant projects we do currently have. Bottom 2 hasn't been awarded yet. The SRF, that's part of applying for SRF funding. You get eligible for a grant. So we're eligible for almost a $2.8 million grant.
And this one up above, this is the other CDBG grant for the sewer plant. So those 2 are grants.
Yeah, and then the storm siren, we haven't even filled out that application yet, but we're hoping to receive that. So all in all, for this budget year, we predicted revenues of 10.3 million. It's hard to know where we're going to be at on these projects. These numbers may or may not change. Expenditures at 10.4 million. With all of the $10 million grants, we only are out of pocket $105,000, so that's pretty good.
As long as we don't count staff time.
Right. That's not added in. So is there any particular slides anyone wants to look at? Any particular fund? Any questions? I mean, if you want, we can go over every 123 slides or.
No.
Is there anything that maybe occurred to anybody since the last presentation?
No, not really.
Or any questions that even maybe not, not related specifically to the slides that you guys had wondered about?
Yes.
Yes.
Uh,
Of course you had one.
I'm sorry.
No, you're-
Special street is for repaving streets, correct? What's the difference between that and like a DNR fund?
The revenue, where the
Just-
funding comes from.
Just where the funding comes from,
Mhm.
so it has to go into,
Yes.
okay.
So special streets tax, it's a special streets tax that the state collects on our behalf.
Okay.
And then they disperse to us. We use that for the repaving of streets. So the repaving that's going on right now, the milling down and the repaving of the streets. The rest of the street department is funded through the general fund. Okay, so, but the repaving of the streets themselves comes out of the special streets tax. Okay, and so, but like I said, the funding of the staff and everything else for street department comes out of general fund, that general sales tax.
That makes sense.
State bureaucracy.
And I mean, that was a question that I know has popped up on social media in the past month or so about, yeah. But I mean, one of the questions was, I'll just address it head on.
Yeah.
You know, why are you doing sidewalks? We need more streets paved. Because we had a grant for the sidewalks
Yeah.
in the downtown project. We've not identified any grants to pave streets with. And so we're limited. You know, we could transfer more from general fund. We just got to figure out what are we cutting to do that.
Well, I think
Yeah, it was
I'm
just a
sorry.
naming convention that I was
Gotcha.
confused on, because
Yeah.
like special streets versus, it sounds like a DNR kind of thing. If you're
Right.
paving and
Right,
you know.
and so that does get all of the expenditures from that special streets fund
yeah.
go through our capital improvement plan, because it
Yeah.
is that
It's-
kind of thing.
Yeah, it makes sense.
And
Yes.
I may add, a lot of times it's hard to get grants for things that the government feels like you should be upgrading
Right.
yearly.
Right,
Much like electronic systems for
Yes.
the hospital. Like, they feel like we should be
Right.
updating that yearly. They will not give us grants for that. So I would assume it'd be very difficult.
yeah, some things they just don't exist, yeah, those
Yeah.
funding sources, so.
Yeah, you do see a lot of that where they're like, oh, you're doing this.
Right, yeah.
The only other slide I want to point out is the very last one.
The very last
Very
one?
last one.
Oh, wow.
Just the debt.
Okay. Oh, the debt.
Looking at the debt.
Gotcha.
So this is the, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is our debt service payments, all the debt that we have. So for this budget year, is next to the last column, we'll be paying out 1.1 million. So the total debt at the end of going into fiscal year 27, we'll have $12 million. And that's part of the bonding should be in place at that time. So part of the addition is that. I do, on the electric utility, we will be, so that February relief, right there. So that was from the February, I think, 21 cold snap. I guess 1 month the city's bill was over $1 million, like close to 1.5 or something like that.
Yeah.
So they gave us a no-interest loan, the government. So this will be the last year we have to pay for that. So $235,000 out of the electric fund will drop off after this year, so that will be great.
Yeah.
I'd like to commend the staff for all the hard work that went into this. It's well-prepared, well-documented, and easy to understand.
Yes.
I
Good
have a-
job.
Good job.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So like Kyle had asked about, the fund where you're projecting like improvements, depreciating out vehicles. Forgive me, emergency fund for if that happens again. Like if we had a surge and not,
Oh, right. Mm-hmm.
where would that be?
Okay, so let me go back up. Gosh, I don't remember what page it was on.
Sorry, I
Our
just-
fund balance,
So we're prepping if that happens again, so we don't have,
right,
113.
113.
There it is.
Okay. All right, so right here's our, that's general fund,
General
sorry.
fund.
Electric. Here's our
Yeah.
electric fund, our operating fund. Here's our repair and replacement fund. This is the electric reserve fund. So right now, we've got basically 1.4 million. The end of this next year, almost 1.5 million is what we have in that fund.
okay,
And so that is specifically our emergency fund.
okay.
Now, again, so we'd have that to pull from. Then we would also have prior year fund balance to pull from if we had to. Does that make sense? So, but yes, at this point, and yeah, this almost 1.5, where we would end up this coming budget year, if everything's approved as proposed, I'm just gonna put it out there. When I stepped into this role, we had $19,000 in that fund,
Exactly.
almost 3 years ago.
No DNR fund.
Yeah, right, no repair and replacement fund. So, I mean,
So we're in
that's-
what, year 3 of correction?
Mhm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think you should bring that up.
Well,
But I don't brag about that or say that much, but I mean, I think it's important. I've been working on reporting to MPUA, where we get our power from. They want to see disclosures because they're making financial decisions on our behalf. And so I was working with their finance person this past week to get all of our disclosures and everything for our electric fund that they needed. And they had it plotted out for the past 4 years. And you see, we went from, that $1.5 million in the negative for our electric fund
To
to
a positive.
being in a positive now. And you could see that progression. And so, I mean, we've come a long way. So,
So everybody remembers the service availability fee,
right.
That's where,
and everybody was angry, the city's got the service availability fee, how much more do we pay?
Right.
So what we did is we took the initiative and we rebuilt that fund back up.
Right.
To cover those costs, so we're not having to borrow that money.
Yep.
But we have to thank our staff because they do all the hard work for us, the heavy lifting, but.
Well,
yeah.
but I'll say, it's a joint effort among staff, but it's also the folks who serve on our committees, understanding where we were and where we need to go, and helping us by making those recommendations. We will make our recommendations, and then you all either approving or helping tweak that and helping make those decisions. So it's, I feel like we've come a long way, and it's been a huge group effort, so, anyway. All right. What else? Any other questions?
No, I don't, no. but-
Miss Annie, you've been really quiet tonight. Okay, I just want to make sure that you get asked if you have questions, so. She's soaking it up, got
Well,
it.
you went over it really well with this previously.
Right.
I
Right.
felt like I had a good understanding going into tonight, just from the
Right.
previous.
And that's our
meeting, so.
intent, that the first meeting, we go over in detail.
Yeah.
That way you guys have time to think about it, let it soak in. Then if you have questions that come up, we have this second chance to address those. So,
Can I
um,
say?
I do want to echo David's comments and say thank you very much, because there was a tremendous amount of work that went into this from Sally, you and Stacy and others. And, you know, we were able
Yeah.
to follow it, understand it, and I felt like we were really prepared for tonight.
Good.
And to not be here all night tonight.
Right.
So, you know, you went through it with us before, and I thought it was great. So
Good.
thank you very
Thank you.
much.
thank you.
So I did want to say, Miss Annie had asked me about the, who do I talk to about overgrown lawns in my neighborhood? I take real good care. She takes real good care of her yard and you know, the neighborhood. She wants to look nice. And that's that piece with the code enforcement
Right.
officer getting help so that he can go out and continue to do the work he's doing so that those folks get noticed. And he's real good about it. He doesn't knock and talk and has pleasant conversations with people. And 9 times out of 10, Joe, 8 times out of 10, things get taken care of. You know.
I know, I mean, it's pretty consistent, close to 100%.
Oh,
Yeah.
He's only had a couple of his that had to go back and issue something, so,
there we go.
so. he's doing well.
That's another thing, that if the public was aware how to report it,
Gotcha. Okay,
it
so.
would help these people.
Right.
You know, they live in the neighborhood.
Right.
Their officers cover the whole
Right.
town, so,
Right.
and that's,
So-
I learned it for
right.
myself.
So, for anybody who might be watching from home, the way to report any nuisance violations, tall weeds, trash, unlicensed inoperable vehicles, things of that nature, would be to call the police department and ask for code enforcement. And then you can leave a message with the dispatcher, or if Eric's in, you can speak with him. But that would be the way to report it, is through the police department. And that number, non-emergency dispatch, is 729-4242.
Thank
So,
you.
mhm.
Yeah, I mean,
Gotcha. Nope.
we
need
get
to address
results
this stuff,
100% of the time.
Right.
He's doing well. Very good at his job.
Yeah.
I also wanted to bring up payroll. I think it's very valuable to understand the work that was put in, to understand what minimum wage is doing and how we have to continue to increase that. And retention saves so much money.
Yes.
So I'd like to make that piece, because I know that the community that it may upset some people, but retention is such a cost
It is.
saving for
Yes.
a working department.
It's huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And if you're not paying them, and I want to,
Yeah.
you can go to Rolla and go to a fast food place or a department store, and they have a minimum, Phelps Health, $18 an hour.
Yes.
So,
Yep.
right. So thank you for that piece.
Sure. Well, and I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of folks who maybe haven't been in a role where they're responsible for overseeing budget stuff, they don't understand that the cost to train someone isn't just the cost of their training. It's the cost of the efficiency and the time you lose of the person doing the training on the job as well.
Right.
So you're paying double almost to be able to try to train that person. And then if you train them and then they're gone, you're starting all over again. And so it also impacts things like employees being able to take vacations, and, I mean, it impacts all of that. And so then you've got your existing employees who can't take their time off that they've accrued. It causes a lot of issues. So I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you.
I'd like to say one more thing to the council. You're kind of the ambassadors here. Speak freely and enlighten those that, you know, when they say, let them know, hey, I've got the budget here. You want to look at it? You want to see it? I can explain it. I can explain it to you, because most of the people are just uninformed,
Right.
you know, and so
Yeah.
I encourage you.
Yeah.
You know, it's
And
not
this-
always pleasant, but reasonable people
Right.
appreciate it.
Well, and I'd like to say, I appreciate you guys asking me to be on the board, because working for the county, I understand that people don't understand our budget.
Right. Yes. Yes.
The expert.
Right. Well,
Great
and
job.
thank you. And so what we've done the last, I think, 3 years, approved budgets are on our website. Now, they're huge documents.
Yeah.
But they are available on our website. Anybody can go look at them at any time. In whatever form this budget gets approved, then it will be posted to our website also. So they're available at any time for somebody to go download and look at. But I get it. If you don't have a little guidance, it's hard to tell what you're looking at, so. Okay. Anything else?
Thanks, staff, for coming back every day
Yes, so, okay, so we did determine that we don't have a quorum for CIP, but we do have a quorum for Finance Committee. And so what we need at this time is a formal recommendation from the Finance Committee to the Board of Aldermen on what you recommend they do with this budget. So,
So we're looking for a recommendation
Right.
for a vote on the city's budget.
right, so we need a motion first, Tim.
I would so move to recommend the budget as written to the Board of Aldermen.
And second?
Call for a vote. David, or I'll start with Kyle Williams.
Aye. Yes.
David Weiss,
Aye.
Lauren Toman,
Yes.
and Patty.
Yes.
Okay. All right, thank you all very much for your time.
Yes.
All right.
You're my man.
And then-
You're my man.
Do you want to call for adjournment?
Oh, yeah.
He was getting praised.
I mean, unless you just want to hang out.
Give him a
We have
break.
a motion for adjournment.
Motion.
Second.
Second.
All right.